Without praising Reverend Edgar Boyd, the senior pastor of the First AME Church of Los Angeles, and he made sure that I got here today. And so, again, I visit many of AME churches. I have Grant in my district. I have a number of AME churches all over California, Southern California, and I'd like to say thank you to the entire AME Church for being the progressive ministry that you are. I appreciate you. I'd like to thank the leaders of the AME Church's Connectional lay organization for wanting me to come here to speak to you today, especially Worldwide President Valerie Bell and 5th District President Simeon Roden. I would also like to thank all of you, the spiritual leaders who came together from around the world to reinforce your devotion to the principles that guide us. Amen. I want you to know that I have a great appreciation for a special woman who I have interacted with. I've been at churches with. She's been at the Congressional Black Caucus, Bishop Bessie McKinney. I want you to know that I not only thank all of you, the spiritual leaders who came together from around the world to reinforce your devotion to the principles that guide us. The Connectional lay organization is truly uplifting, not only for your works in the church, but also your community involvement. I'm grateful to be with thousands of laity walking humbly with God to do justice and love mercy. You transform the church's teachings into actions. You fortify the weak and guide the lost. Yeah. And so I have a great appreciation for all of you. At this convening of the church's lay leaders, I cannot understate the value and success of your good works. Yes, you're dedicated to feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, clothing the naked, caring for the sick, guiding those who have gone astray, visiting the jails and prisons, caring for the children, supporting education, and changing lives, whole neighborhoods, whole cities, whole towns, whole states. However, I cannot pretend that your good works can be business as usual today. Yes. Your challenge rivals many of our past challenges. Yes, as African Americans, we survived slavery and Jim Crow laws. We fought for civil rights and voting rights. And when the doors were shut to us on so many fronts, we organized our own churches and built our own schools. We struggled to defy racism and discrimination, and even died in the struggle for freedom and justice. We have experienced hurtful, harmful, and destructive setbacks. However, as we continued in our struggle, we've had meaningful and profound successes. We forced changes in many systems. We forced the most powerful to confront the real meaning of justice, freedom, and democracy. We confronted hostile and racist politicians and hostile courts. And still, we managed to survive and prosper far beyond what the haters and evildoers could ever have imagined. Our struggles are constant and ongoing. I submit to you today, at this perilous moment in the history of this country, the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, is a man who is the least qualified to hold the most powerful and prestigious position. And you know, we feel trapped with an unqualified, incapable, dishonest, illegitimate, unpatriotic imposter who is a racist, decisive, and dangerous. On July 17th, Special Counsel Mueller will testify before two congressional committees, the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee. He will give a deeper understanding of his long-awaited report that investigated Trump for collusion with Russia and obstruction of justice. Collusion and obstruction of justice emanated from Trump's well-documented undermining of our democracy that helped foreigners interfere in our election and hack into the Democratic National Committee emails and election systems. But this president really actually defined himself many years before he ever dreamed of becoming president. Trump has a long record of racial discrimination. The Justice Department sued Trump in 1973 for violating the Fair Housing Act by rejecting renters because of race and color. After agreeing not to discriminate, in 1978, Trump was cited by the DOJ for violating that agreement, stating that Trump's discriminated against blacks in the conditions of rental, made statements indicating discrimination based on race, and told blacks that apartments were not available when in fact they were. In 1989, Trump stoked hatred against blacks by his full page against the Central Park Five and calling for the death penalty, which tainted all of the public opinion around that case and led to all five being wrongfully convicted, despite their convictions being overturned due to a confession and DNA evidence proving their innocence. Trump continued to insist that the Central Park Five were guilty, using them to stoke fear against blacks for his political benefit in 2016, and reiterating his false claim as recently as 2 weeks ago. Trump's birther claim that President Obama was not born in the U.S. was nothing but thinly veiled racism and bigotry.
That's right.
His attempt to delegitimize Obama is ironic because Trump's presidency actually is illegitimate. Since Trump won by using Russian help and breaking the law, now Trump's birther tactics are being revived by his son, who just yesterday or so attacked Senator Kamala Harris in the same way. Last Thursday, when someone tweeted, quote, "Kamala Harris is not an American black," Trump Jr. promptly retweeted it to those who are eager to receive his falsehoods, adding, "Is this true? ? Row. Well, let me just repeat what I heard someone say just yesterday. They're not surprised at Trump Jr. The rotten apple does not fall far from the rotten tree.
That's right.
In 2016, Trump's campaign pitch to African Americans was, and I quote, "What have you got to lose?" As if we all live in squalor at the bottom of the barrel in his eyes and have no hope without his condescending paternalistic help. It doubled as a pitch for black votes and a dog whistle to his white face. Trump demonizes anyone he does not like him or isn't willing to pledge loyalty to him. He is especially eager to demonize blacks, and his contempt for us is loud and clear. Trump attempted to destroy Kaepernick for protesting police brutality, saying, and I quote, "Maybe he should find a country that works better for him." When NFL players kept protesting, Trump said NFL owners should say, "Get that blank blank off the field right now." If I wasn't with y'all, I would have said it. They don't know those words. And he pointed, as he said, he's fired, talking about what the owners should say to the players. Trump insulted both LeBron James and CNN's Don Lemon by tweeting, I quote, "LeBron James was just interviewed by the dumbest man on television, Don Lemon. He made LeBron look smart, which isn't easy to do," quote unquote. He referred to Meghan Markle, the African-American actress turned British princess, as nasty. He praised Omarosa Manigault when he hired her, but when she threatened to expose his racism, he trashed her as wacky, a dog, vicious, not smart, and a crazed, lying lowlife. And yes, he attacked me viciously, making the case that this outspoken black woman, member of Congress, heading one of the most powerful committees in the Congress of the United States, he said, "I have a low IQ." And in doing so, he was attempting to shut me down because I initiated the conversation about impeaching him as early as 2017.
Yep.
Now, if he had actually known anything about me and my history, he should have known I cannot be intimidated. I don't back down. I have no fear. And my life's work and experiences trained and developed me to take on demons like him. Trump disparaged black women journalists who are among the best in the business, saying to Abby Phillip, "You ask a lot of stupid questions," telling April Ryan to just sit down and calling her a loser, and calling Yamiche Alcindor's question racist when she asked if his rhetoric emboldened white supremacists. Any pretense that Trump is not a racist was washed away following the 2017 violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. Trump's claim that you also had some very fine people on both sides revealed that Trump believes white supremacists and neo-Nazis have the same moral standing as people who object to their bigotry. By validating them and aligning with their cause, Trump, in effect, made himself their grand wizard. Further confirming his racism, in a January 2018 meeting with senators about immigration, Trump referred to African countries and Haiti as another one of those words I can't say in front of you all.
Come on.
And lamented that there weren't more immigrants coming from Norway. I doubt we need to commission a study to identify the most obvious difference between Africans and Norwegians. $20 bills were going to be printed with Harriet Tubman's image instead of Andrew Jackson's, starting in 2020. In May, the change was delayed now to 2028, probably to buy time to conceal it completely. It's not clear if Trump directed the delay or if his staff did it to please him. Either way, the decision to withhold that honor from a black woman hero amounts to racism by disrespecting black history and Tubman's legendary role in it. But of course, Trump didn't stop with his attempt to denigrate African Americans. In his attempts to destroy entire ethnic groups, Trump issued travel bans on immigrants from Muslim countries, and he targeted Mexican Americans who he described as drug dealers, criminals, and rapists. He continues to dog whistle to his uninformed supporters accusations that are designed to promote hatred. Today, the world is witnessing a crisis on our borders that was created by this president as he defies our country's laws about immigration that allow those wishing to escape persecution and come to this country, particularly from Mexico, in an effort to keep them out. He has developed some of the most racist, hateful, and immoral practices, the worst of which is the separation of children from their parents. These children who have been separated from their parents stand to be psychologically damaged for most of their lives by Trump. Locking children in cages without soap, toothbrushes, showers, blankets, and clean clothes, let alone schooling and recreation. Abandoning toddlers and infants to the care of other young children as if they could properly feed, diaper, clean, and care for them. Failing to keep records of the separated parents and children, which prevents many families from ever being reunited. Neglecting children's nutritional needs with a daily diet based on frozen burritos, which jeopardizes their health and development. Threatening to round up and deport millions of immigrants, which is evil, impractical, and reminiscent of the purges of Joseph Stalin. Refusing to consider comprehensive immigration reform and killing a deal on DACA for the Dreamers shortly after agreeing to it. Spending tax dollars on a border wall to demonstrate his racist antipathy toward people who speak Spanish, and maligning immigrants by his travel ban against Muslims and fictitious fear of caravans to delight his supporters for his own political benefit. This, for us, cannot help but cause us to reflect on our own history. Tragically, Trump's antipathy toward immigrants harkens back to the days of our own slavery. Trump's separation of children from their parents and abuse of both replicates the torment that oppressed our ancestors. It forces us to confront the demonic history of the auction block, rife with evil and soaked in tears, where humans were sold like cattle and treated with less respect. At the old slave mart on Chambers Street in Charleston, South Carolina, we can practically hear echoes of screaming children who were pulled from the arms of their parents, wailing parents as they lay eyes on their children for the last time, and cries of siblings and spouses who are sent to different plantations great distances apart, marched toward a slave owner at the left while their loved one is marched toward the right. July 2018, he admitted separating families to punish them and discourage others from coming, saying, "Tell people not to come to our country illegally." That's the solution. Don't come to our country illegally. With sinister intent, refusing empathy to those who seek grace and salvation, Trump grovels in the depths of immorality by all that he has demonstrated. We must feel the pain of the separated families. We must see each caged child as our own. Just a few days ago, because of the outrage generated by the border crisis that this president created, the House of Representatives passed a bill with humanitarian aid for immigrants at the border. Still, we must do more. In keeping with the fourth pillar of the AME Church's motto, I quote, "Humankind, our family," quote, unquote. There is no differentiation between people of color and people of other ethnic backgrounds. There is no footnote for immigrants from Mexico, African countries, Haiti, Guatemalans, or Muslim countries. In his letter from the Birmingham jail, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King wrote his eternal warning: "Justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere."
Right.
His words remind us of our duty to rise up with unity for our sisters and brothers everywhere. We continue to witness injustices in an education system that expects kids to perform well despite outdated books, overcrowded schools, a lack of tutors, counselors, and first-rate teachers, and an evaluation system based on the interest of gentrified society that didn't consider the challenges I heard of. A healthcare system, actually the absence of a system that says just don't get sick, has no school nurses, medication or immunizations, a food system that causes low-income families to rely on corner stores with less nutritious foods and higher prices because it is too far to go to supermarkets that had fresh fruits, vegetables, and meats. Industrial systems that spewed toxics into air and water and imposes other environmental hazards into nearby schools, parks, and low-income neighborhoods, all of which impair human health. Economic systems that lack equal opportunity, job skills training, gateways to the workforce, social mobility out of poverty, and access to loans and credit to start a small business. A police system so infested with an inherent bias against Black and brown neighbors that it treats us as felons in waiting, unfairly subjecting us to suspicion, stops, searches, arrest, and abuse. A judicial system rife with implicit bias against minorities that results in presumptions of guilt, unfair court proceedings, higher conviction rates, longer sentences, and inhumane prison conditions. Government systems that disregard obstacles faced by low-income people and communities of color, neglect real needs and interests, and are unresponsive to advocacy for reform. Electoral systems that limit voter registration, selectively discourage enfranchisement, erect barriers to voting, turn a blind eye toward voter suppression, and delegitimize votes cast on our people. These are systemic barriers to social justice that have been institutionalized and ingrained within our society. Despite progress, all of them remain in one form or another, to one degree or another, one place or another. All of them demand resolution so we can exile them to the history of books. Social justice is enshrined in the church's theme, the AME Church, a social justice and liberating faith. Church members uplift the fallen empower the disenfranchised, right the wrongs we see, give voice to the voiceless, and improve the lives of those in need. As a legislator, I see social justice in terms of human consequences, the rights, fairness, and opportunities that must be restored. When a Black teen is unjustifiably detained, searched without probable cause, verbally disparaged, handcuffed, arrested, and set up for bigger problems with an arrest record the next time they're stopped. When racists who have not been so obvious are coming out of the woodwork, racism is being revived every day since this president has, in his own way, given license to let racists come out of the closet and declare their vile views. When citizens are prohibited from voting because their names were purged from voter rolls or didn't have a specific type of voter ID, and when we protect our children from what happened to Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, Tanisha Anderson, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Stephen Clark, and countless more Black and brown Americans. The theme, Onward to Greater Works, proclaims the mandate to right these wrongs. As Booker T. Washington said, if you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. As I mentioned earlier, this president does not know me or my heist. I believe in righting these wrongs and lifting up the marginalized, the abused, the forgotten, yet deserving human beings. While serving in the California State Assembly, I introduced social justice bills that became law, including legislation to divest California pension funds, assets in South Africa to vilify the immortal apartheid regime, which accelerated the regime's collapse, include minority-owned and women-owned businesses and state contracts, prohibit sterilization of women as a condition of their employment, establish procedures for early detection of child abuse, shelter abused women at confidential locations, protect the rights of juveniles in the criminal justice system, reduce exposure of the public to toxics and hazardous materials, and prohibit strip searches and cavity searches for minor crimes. Since I've been in Congress, I continue the crusade for social justice through legislation and other means on many issues, such as expanding access to treatment and services for minorities with AIDS, preventing discrimination against African American farmers, establishing job skills, training programs for youth and parolees, curtailing predatory behavior by for-profit colleges, leading the caucus calling for an end to the war in Iraq, and creating offices of minority and women inclusion at the FDIC, the SEC, and other financial services regulators to improve diversity at their agencies and companies they regulate. This year, when Democrats took control of the House, I became the first woman and the first African American to chair the powerful Financial Services Committee.
Come on.
A platform to pursue a full agenda of greater works, because equal opportunity is still lacking in every sector of business and government. I defied Trump's attempts to intimidate and silence me, and I demonstrated to him that we're not going back. I will fight to go forward. And in order to show that I was in charge of that committee, I began by creating a subcommittee on diversity and inclusion. I'm holding hearings to open the doors of opportunity to men and women of color who have been denied upward mobility, denied supervisory roles that they deserve, management roles that they earn, and seats on corporate boards of banks and major financial institutions and corporations from which they have been excluded. Some of the bank CEOs scrambled to upgrade their diversity programs prior to a hearing that I called. And those who didn't were taken to task for their failure to improve. As witnesses learn, and they're all learning, I've got the gavel, and I'm not afraid to use it. With Democrats in control of the House, We're advancing social justice in many ways. We created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to protect hardworking Americans who have fought to live the American dream and took out mortgages only to discover the tricks that were being played by Wall Street that caused foreclosures and boarded up homes in their neighborhoods. This president has worked to undo all of the protections that we put in place to protect consumers following the 2008 home foreclosure crisis. Since I have become the chair of the Financial Services Committee, I introduced the Consumers First Act to undo the damage done by Trump and his OMB director, Mick Mulvaney. Yes, I guess they're learning. I have the gavel, and I'm not afraid to use it. Prescription drugs are so expensive that many people choose between paying for their medications or paying for their rent and food. In May, the House passed a bill to lower the cost of prescriptions, and we are pressuring Senate Republicans to join us in solving this problem. And the president has talked about infrastructure, but he's done nothing. Infrastructure is aging and in great disrepair. Democrats are pushing hard for upgrades. Trump briefly agreed to a $2 trillion deal, but when he came to a meeting with Nancy Pelosi, he reneged on the deal and started begging Speaker Pelosi to stop investigating him. And so she did not agree to that. He picked up his marbles and went home, which says a lot about his marbles. Meanwhile, the bridges are decaying and some collapse, as we saw in Minnesota. Water systems are old and unsafe, as we saw in Flint, Michigan. Electric grids don't serve everyone and aren't secure in windstorms. Highways and roads are aging, damaged, and hazardous. And broadband doesn't reach everyone, causing a new digital divide. Guns cause so much deaths in our cities that they often don't even stir public outrage. And semi-automatic rifles are being used to inflict mass murder. This must stop. The NRA must be exposed for what they are, a cabal of corrupt, immoral, self-enriching predators who profit from gun sales and use dues for personal luxuries while convincing their members of fictitious threats to lawful owners. We passed 2 bills strengthening background checks and will keep fighting against these weapons of mass murder. We're also on defense, stopping Trump's infliction of injustice. He wants to revert to the era when life was precarious, corporate abuses were unrestrained, and opportunity was a gift to the privileged. Trump's education and justice departments inverted affirmative action to benefit whites over minorities, scaled back enforcement, and rescinded rules that allowed colleges to consider an applicant's race. The Justice Department proposed ending the disparate impact test that has enhanced civil rights enforcement for decades. On his last day as Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, whose bigotry takes a back seat in the bus to no one, halted consent decrees that ensure fair, non-discriminatory police conduct. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, the elitist queen of private schools, who's never really seen the inside of a classroom, who Trump put in charge of our public schools, reduced enforcement of discrimination, sexual assault, students' rights, and unfair student loans. But this is typical of his cabinet. Now, I know some of you all know Ben Carson, but I'm gonna talk about him too. Housing Secretary Ben Carson tried to triple the rent on the poorest renters, putting 1.7 million at risk of eviction and homelessness. My committee and I fought his heartless policy. He backed off. Well, you know, he gets a lot of compliments because he's known to be a fine brain surgeon. But he's ignorant about HUD's mission. And incompetent at housing the poor. I simply say, God bless you, Ben Carson, but you should go back to the operating room. Until then, we'll find that I've got the gavel, and I'm going to continue to use it. Healthcare, ladies and gentlemen, is a right. Yet the Attorney General wants to kill Obamacare, as well as coverage for pre-existing conditions, leaving many uninsured and raising everyone's costs. Democrats are fighting to keep Obamacare, full coverage, and a public option while we work toward Medicare for all. The stock market is high and unemployment rate is low, yet most families don't benefit. Unemployment is higher among blacks and Latinos. Many jobs don't pay a living wage. Most people struggle with bills, and Trump treats the Treasury like a slush fund that he can use as he wishes. House Democrats are escalating oversight to hold the administration accountable. The culprit in chief is the guy living in our White House. So let's talk about him. On April 26th, the tally of Trump's lies reached 10,000, according to the Washington Post, and he is now near 11,000. Some people are shocked by him, but I'm way past that. His depravity knows no bounds, and I expect nothing from him. Trump seldom misses an opportunity to say or do the wrong thing. The more the truth about him is exposed, the more he lies to cover it up. He's allergic to the truth, but we aren't. So here's some serious truth. Trump demeans the poor, degrades women, condemns those who disagree with him, and vilifies any racial or ethnic group that doesn't look like people at his country clubs. He defends white supremacists and neo-Nazis and emulates oppressive, brutal dictators. He claims that journalists are the enemies of the people. Can you quite get over this trip that he made with Kim Jong-un to cross over into North Korea? Used it as a photo op. And I'm understanding changing foreign policy on the spot. And instead of demanding that they get rid of all of their nuclear weapons and capability, he is now saying that, well, whatever you got you can keep, just don't do any more. Who does this president think he is?
Come on.
He wants to be like Kim Jong-un. He wants to be like dictators around the world. He loves Putin. And even though Putin has been exposed, he will not condemn him. The real enemies are lies, injustice, racism, bigotry, misogyny, hatred, disrespect, greed, exclusion, narrow-mindedness, preservation of privilege, intolerance, and anyone who propagates them, especially a president who embodies all of them. In 2017, I began calling for Trump's impeachment, and since then, he gave us many reasons to fulfill the Constitution's mandate for a president who has committed impeachable acts. Special Counsel Mueller reminded us that Russians hacked into our election systems, interfered with our election, undermined our democracy. He detailed at least 10 times when Trump obstructed justice, and the only reason he didn't indict Trump was a flawed policy against indicting a sitting president. Mueller showed evidence of collusion based on contacts between Russians and Trump's family and friends, which helped Trump win. Trump admitted that Russia helped him by tweeting. Now, this is what he said: "I had nothing to do with Russia helping me to get elected." That's an admission. In June, crazy as it is, he said he would collude again in 2020 with Russians and other foreigners who gave him information about his opponent. He admitted he would knowingly break the law, which tells me that he knowingly broke the law the first time in 2016. I'm incensed by Trump's